Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission here is pretty straightforward. We take piles of research, surprising data, compelling stories, and we cut right through to the core insights you actually need to be truly well-informed.
Exactly.
And today, we are doing a deep dive into something absolutely critical for long-term achievement, something maybe overlooked sometimes: grit. Grit. We're going to unpack the psychological evidence, all the studies arguing that, success isn't just about the talent you're born with. It's much more about the tenacious effort you apply over time.
Yeah, we're really challenging that kind of persistent idea, the myth of innate talent.
Right. That fundamental, sometimes misleading myth.
And look, this tension, talent versus effort, that's really the heart of what we're digging into today based on our sources.
Okay.
And this isn't just theory, right? We're pulling from some really comprehensive psychological studies, rigorous data, think high-stakes places like West Point, and also some really intimate personal stories.
So a real mix.
A real mix. The idea is to move past that sort of glamorous, effortless genius story we always hear in pop culture.
Yeah, the overnight success.
Exactly. And focus instead on the measurable, deliberate work that goes into real achievement.
And the personal story of the researcher who did a lot of the foundational work here, Angela Duckworth, it actually provides the perfect frame, doesn't it?
It really does. Because she grew up with this father, brilliant guy, but pretty exacting. And he was constantly measuring her and her siblings against, like, the ultimate benchmark, Einstein.
Wow, talk about pressure.
Right. His question over and over was, are you a genius?
Oof.
Yeah. And the pressure was just immense. The underlying message was basically that, intellectual potential, it's inherited, it's fixed. You've either got it or you don't.
So she was basically told, you're no genius, because she wasn't, spontaneously brilliant in the way he imagined.
Pretty much. But then years later, she gets a MacArthur Fellowship, the one people often call the Genius Grant.
Right. Which creates this perfect, almost ironic tension for her own research.
Totally. Because she didn't get that award because she suddenly discovered she was, leagues smarter than everyone.
Yeah.
She won it because her research showed that the most reliable predictor of long-term success, long-term accomplishment, it's something completely separate from raw IQ.
And that's grit.
That's grit. That specific blend of passion and perseverance. So, in a way, her life's work answered her father's question, are you a genius? But maybe not in the way he expected.
Yeah, it redefined it. It proved that genius isn't about success without effort. Okay, so let's really unpack this. If we're saying grit is separate from talent, we need a rock-solid definition. What are the two essential pieces here, based on the research?
Right. So grit, fundamentally, it's got two key parts. First, there's passion.
Okay.
Which isn't just, intense interest for a moment. It's about having a consistent, sustained direction for your effort, like a compass.
Okay, passion is direction. What's the second part?
Perseverance. That's the stick-to-itiveness, the willingness to work incredibly hard, push through setbacks, often over years, sometimes decades.
Got it. Passion plus perseverance. And this idea that these two things are distinct from raw ability, well, the evidence becomes really clear when you look at extreme situations, right?
High-pressure environments.
Exactly. And the classic case study here comes from West Point, the U.S. military academy.
And specifically, their initial training program, the summer induction they called BEAST.
Right. And BEAST is, it's designed to be the ultimate test. It weeds out anyone who isn't totally committed.
How intense are we talking?
Think nonstop. Cadets are plunged into this incredibly demanding daily schedule. Starts at 5 a.m., flag raising, hard workout.
Huh?
Then it's just constant rotation. Marching, field training, intense classes, weapons instruction, all the way until taps at 10 p.m.
Wow.
And there's basically no downtime, no weekends off, almost zero contact with the outside world. It's designed to push commitment to the absolute breaking point, sustain pressure. Now, the military already has a way to measure potential, right? This incredibly detailed metric called the whole candidate score.
That's right.
Can you break down what that actually includes? What does it measure?
Yeah. The whole candidate score, it's basically the military's attempt to quantify inherent ability and potential. It pulls together academic scores like SATs or ACTs, high school rank,
Okay.
ratings on leadership potential from interviews and recommendations, and also physical aptitude tests. It's meant to be comprehensive.
So if innate talent was the deciding factor, you'd expect that score to predict who makes it through BEAST.
Logically, yes.
Yeah.
That score should have been the key predictor.
But that's not what they found at all, is it?
Not even close. This study looked at 2 separate years. In the first year, 71 cadets dropped out during Beast. The second year, it was 62.
Okay. Significant numbers.
Definitely. And when the researchers compared the whole candidate scores of the cadets who left versus those who stayed, what do you think they found?
Based on what you're saying, probably no difference.
Exactly. The scores were, and this is the quote, indistinguishable.
Wow. Indistinguishable.
Yeah. The military's best, most comprehensive measure of aptitude for military life. It had basically zero predictive power when it came to surviving that initial hardest period of training.
So what did predict it?
The only factor that turned out to be an astoundingly reliable predictor of who made it through Beast was the grit score, measured separately.
So talent, as measured by the Army, was essentially irrelevant if that long-term perseverance wasn't there to keep pushing when things got incredibly tough.
That's the takeaway. The ability to withstand that chronic, unrelenting grind was completely separate from the aptitude that got them accepted in the first place.
That's a powerful finding. And this separation, this distinction between talent and grit, it gets even weirder, maybe more counterintuitive. We look at highly selective academic environments.
Right. That's where we hit what the research calls the brightness trap.
The brightness trap. Okay.
So researchers looked at a select group of Ivy League undergrads. Highly intelligent, obviously. High SAT scores across the board.
Makes sense.
But when they measured both SAT scores and grit levels in this group, they found something surprising. The two were actually inversely correlated.
Wait, inversely, you mean students with higher SAT scores tended to have lower grit scores?
On average, yes. Slightly lower, but the correlation was negative. Higher SATs predicted slightly less grit.
That seems totally backward. Why would that be? Are we saying the smartest students are lazy?
Probably not lazy in the usual sense. But maybe. Less practiced at dealing with real struggle. Less experienced with failure.
Explain that.
Well, think about it. If things have always come relatively easily to you through school, if you're always near the top of the class without having to, really grind or figure out new strategies when you hit a wall.
You don't build up that struggle muscle.
Exactly. You might not develop the psychological tools, the sheer habit of persistence that's needed when you finally encounter something that requires serious, sustained, difficult effort, maybe for the first time in college or later in your career.
So the potential is there, obviously, with the high scores. But what you do with that potential, how long you stick with challenging things, that's a totally different dimension.
Entirely separate. And the critical point here is that we as a society often get, distracted by talent.
Yeah.
We focus so much on the potential that we miss the importance of the perseverance needed to realize it.
And that distraction isn't just an academic curiosity. It has huge real-world consequences, right? Especially in the corporate world.
Oh, absolutely. This societal overvaluation of just being bright, you see it institutionalized, particularly in places like elite consulting firms.
Right, and the McKinsey example comes up in the source material.
Yes. The sources describe this enormous, almost hard-to-believe premium placed purely on analytic ability, just being seen as incredibly smart.
And the interview process reflects that, doesn't it? With those famous brain teasers.
Totally. Like the classic, how many tennis balls are manufactured in the United States per year?
I always found that question so revealing. It's not really about knowing the answer, is it?
Not at all. It's about showing off your mental process, your dexterity under pressure. The researcher even mentions that when she suggested the practical answer, just call the trade association that actually tracks this stuff, the interviewer basically said, okay, we've learned what we need to know from your process.
Right. They value the performance of thinking over maybe the practical solution. And they lean heavily on things like high SAT scores for that initial sorting, right? Believing they're grabbing the best and brightest.
Exactly. And this whole approach, this talent mindset, where you aggressively hire, promote, pay the people who seem most talented, and maybe quickly get rid of the perceived bottom performers, it was really popularized in the late 90s, books like The War for Talent.
I remember that buzz.
But there are serious long-term dangers to this pure talent focus. Various critiques argue it can actually foster a pretty toxic environment.
How so?
Well, the ultimate cautionary tale cited in the research is Enron.
Yes, Enron.
They were named America's most innovative company 6 years straight, driven almost entirely by this intense systemic focus on hiring and promoting only the best and brightest. Superstar culture.
And we all know how that ended. Catastrophic failure. Massive accounting fraud.
Right. And the critique isn't that the people at Enron weren't smart. They clearly had high IQs. The problem was that demanding employees constantly proved they were smarter and better than everyone else. Well, it created this highly narcissistic culture focused only on short-term performance.
It encouraged showing off, maybe hiding weaknesses.
Exactly. It discouraged the kind of long-term learning and growth that actually requires some vulnerability, admitting you don't know something, admitting mistakes. And crucially, it discouraged the kind of sustained, gritty perseverance needed for long-term ethical success.
So by fixating only on talent, the actual value of continuous effort, of just grinding it out, it just fades into the background.
It gets completely overshadowed
Yeah.
and potentially leads to disaster.
Okay, so if talent is separate from grit and focusing only on talent, that talent mindset is potentially flawed, even dangerous for long-term success. We need a better model, a better framework for understanding achievement.
Exactly. And the research offers a couple of, well, deceptively simple formulas that really shift the focus and show where the true leverage lies.
Okay, formulas. Let's hear them.
This is where we kind of move from the psychological to almost the physics of achievement, you could say. Psychologists have broken down the path to accomplishment into two basic steps. The first formula is about building your capability. Talent x effort, skill.
Talent times effort equals skill. Okay, let's unpack that. Talent here isn't like some fixed total amount you possess.
Right. In this context, talent is defined more as the speed at which you improve your skill when you apply effort, how quickly you learn.
Ah, okay, so faster learning equals higher talent in this equation, and skill is the result, the actual developed ability itself.
Correct. But just having a skill isn't enough, right?
Yeah.
You could be incredibly skilled at something, but never actually do anything with it.
True, you have to apply it.
Which brings us to Formula 2. Skill x effort, achievement.
Skill times effort equals achievement. Okay, so achievement is the outcome, the result. What you actually accomplish when you use that skill you develop.
Precisely. Skill is how good you are. Achievement is what you produce.
Now, the really crucial insight here, the part that kind of bends your mind a bit, is that effort shows up in both formulas.
Yes. It appears twice, as a multiplier in both steps.
And that's why this framework fundamentally changes how we should think about success, isn't it?
It really does. Because we usually think of talent and effort as maybe, I don't know, 50-50 contributors. Or maybe we even overweight talent.
Yeah, definitely.
But these formulas show mathematically that effort is the central point of leverage. Effort builds the skill in the first place, that's Formula 1, and then effort is needed again to apply that skill and actually get things done, Formula 2.
So if you're, say, average in talent, you're learning speed, but you're relentless with your effort. You put in double the effort.
You don't just improve faster, you compound your gains. Your effort multiplies your talent to build skill faster, and it multiplies that resulting skill to produce more achievement. Effort counts twice.
That's huge. It's really the ultimate argument for stamina over sparkle, isn't it?
Couldn't have said it better. Stamina over sparkle.
And you can see this compounding effect really clearly in areas like craftsmanship, right? The example of the potter Warren Mackenzie is perfect.
Absolutely. He's a renowned potter, and he had this great observation. The first 10,000 pots are difficult, he said, and then it gets a little bit easier.
10,000 pots. That sounds like Formula 1 in action.
It's a perfect illustration. When he started, maybe his inherent talent for pottery, his initial learning speed was just average. Who knows?
Right.
But through sheer, continuous, repetitive effort, making pot after pot after pot, his skill improved dramatically. He wasn't just practicing randomly. He was applying massive effort specifically to build his skill level.
And he probably looked back at pot number 100 and thought it was terrible compared to pot number 9,000.
Exactly. He mentioned that things he thought were good early on just lacked the richness and refinement he aims for now. That's skill development via effort.
And then naturally, as his skill level rose because of all that effort, he could probably produce more good, accomplished pots in a day. That's the shift to Formula 2.
Right. Applying that high skill level through continued daily effort leads to greater overall achievement, more high-quality pots produced over his career. Effort built the skill, and effort deployed the skill.
This idea of just working at it, maybe even working the weak spot, it also comes through strongly with the novelist John Irving.
Oh yeah, great example. Irving is often praised, for these seemingly natural, sprawling, complex stories he tells.
Definitely seen as a great storyteller.
But he himself completely rejects the idea that he's a natural.
Really? What does he say?
He explicitly says he was not a natural. His entire creative process, he claims, is built around his willingness to just rewrite endlessly, draft after draft after draft.
Wow.
He actually made a conscious choice early on to take his perceived lack of talent seriously. His confidence, he says, doesn't come from some bolt of lightning, some innate genius.
It comes from stamina.
It comes from his sheer, unflagging stamina to go over the material again and again and again, no matter how hard it is.
And what's really powerful is how he apparently turned a perceived weakness into a strength.
That's right. He talks about having difficulties with reading and spelling early on, which, for a novelist sounds like a pretty major disadvantage.
You'd think so.
But later, he came to see it as an advantage because it forced him to slow down. It forced him to review his sentences, his paragraphs, meticulously over and over.
So the struggle itself became the mechanism for improvement.
Exactly. That continuous, deliberate effort, born partly from a struggle, transformed what looked like a limitation into the very foundation of his mastery, that intense dedication to refining the work. Formula 1 and 2 embodied in his process.
That dedication, that philosophy of just extreme effort. Maybe the most vivid example is Will Smith.
Ah, yes. Mr. Work Ethic himself.
Right. Despite all the success, Oscars, Grammys, global stardom, he doesn't chalk it up to being uniquely talented.
No, his view is just pure, unadulterated grit. He famously said something like, "Where I excel is ridiculous, sickening work ethic."
Sickening work ethic. That's intense.
It is. And he defines his success almost entirely in terms of output and sheer persistence. He has that quote, "I will not be outworked, period."
Yeah, I remember that. And the follow-up.
You might have more talent than me. You might be smarter than me. But if we get on the treadmill together, there's two things. You're getting off first, or I'm going to die.
Whoa. That is an absolutely astonishing level of commitment.
It really is. And it forces you to confront the sheer duration and intensity of effort that's often required to reach and stay at an elite level in any field.
It's not just about finding your one special skill. It's about having the willpower, the stamina, to stay on that metaphorical treadmill longer than everybody else.
Effort really is the central axis. It's the thing everything else spins around according to these formulas. Talent gets you started, maybe determines the slope of improvement, but effort determines how far up that slope you actually climb and what you build when you get there.
Okay, so the evidence is pretty clear. Effort counts twice, it compounds achievement. But look, maintaining that kind of sickening work ethic, like Will Smith talks about, over years, over decades, that takes something deeper than just a deadline or a short-term goal.
Absolutely. You need fuel for that engine.
Which brings us to the inner game, the drivers of that long-term persistence. Passion and purpose. Now, we often have this romantic idea about passion, right? Like it's this sudden discovery, fireworks going off.
Yeah, the epiphany moment. Love at first sight with an activity or a field.
But the research strongly suggests that's actually, well, pretty misleading.
It really is. That whole fireworks metaphor, it kind of sets people up for disappointment because it implies you just wait around passively for passion to strike you.
Right.
But for the gritty people studied, passion looks much more like a compass than fireworks.
A compass? How so?
Well, a compass takes time to calibrate, right? You have to tinker with it, test it, actively build your understanding of where north is. Passion for gritty people seems to be similar. It's a process of active construction, not passive discovery. You develop it through interaction with the world.
Okay, active construction. Can you give an example of what that looks like in practice?
Sure. A great one from the sources is the journey of Jeffrey Gettleman. He ended up becoming the Pulitzer Prize-winning East Africa bureau chief for the New York Times.
Okay, impressive career.
Definitely. Now, his first trip to East Africa as a college student, yeah, it blew his mind. He was fascinated, but he didn't instantly know, I will be the bureau chief.
It wasn't fireworks leading to a clear path.
No. His actual career path was this highly deliberate, multi-year strategy specifically designed to get him back to that region he was fascinated by.
So he worked backward.
Kind of. He realized that journalism offered a clearer, more hierarchical path. Start at a small paper,
Yep.
A, move to mid-level 1, B, eventually aim for the foreign correspondent job, C, compared to, say, photojournalism, which he also considered but saw as less structured.
Ah, so he didn't just wait for inspiration to dictate his career. He already had the interest, the fascination, and then he actively manufactured the professional route that would let him pursue it long term.
Exactly. He actively constructed the path to align with his interest.
And you see a similar kind of sequential active process with someone like Julia Child, right? Her famous aha moment in France.
Right, eating that sole meunière in Rouen.
It wasn't, aha, I am destined to be a famous chef.
No. According to the accounts, the epiphany was simply that the fish was the most exciting meal of my life, absolutely divine. That was the spark.
Just an appreciation and intense interest sparked.
Exactly. And that initial spark was followed by a whole succession of further interest-stimulating experiences that she actively sought out. Enrolling in Le Cordon Bleu cooking school, making friends with the vendors at Parisian markets, diving deep into classic French cookbooks with her collaborators.
So the passion wasn't a single event, it was cultivated. It grew over time through continuous engagement and exploration.
Precisely. Active cultivation, not passive discovery. And that kind of sustained, directed passion naturally leads people to develop what the research calls a goal hierarchy.
A goal hierarchy, okay. Sounds structured.
It is. It's basically a system of objectives, from the very small to the very large, that ensures all your daily actions are ultimately pointing toward a single top-level guiding purpose.
How does that break down? The sources mentioned 3 levels.
Yeah, it's a pretty simple framework. At the bottom, you have your low-level goals. These are the concrete, short-term things you need to get done, like finishing this report by 3 p.m. or getting out the door by 8 a.m. for your run.
Okay, the immediate tasks.
Then you have mid-level goals. These are broader objectives that those low-level goals serve. So finishing the report serves the mid-level goal of, say, impressing your boss or contributing to a team project. Getting out the door serves the mid-level goal of staying healthy or training for a race.
Makes sense. Low level serves mid-level. What's at the top?
The top-level goal. And this is the crucial one for grit. This represents your ultimate concern, your core values, what you might call your purpose or your calling. It's the why behind all the mid-level and low-level whats.
So all the lower goals need to ultimately connect up to that single top-level purpose.
For truly gritty individuals, yes. There's coherence. Everything aligns toward that ultimate aim.
There's that famous parable that illustrates this, right? The 3 bricklayers.
Yes, it's
Oh.
perfect. Someone asks 3 different bricklayers working on the same site what they're doing.
And the first one says...
The first one sighs and says, "I'm laying bricks." That's just a job, purely a low-level task focus.
Okay, the second one.
The second one says, "I'm building a church." Okay, that's better. He sees the mid-level goal, the project. You could call that a career. There's some ambition there.
And the third bricklayer.
The third one looks up and says, with a sense of purpose, "I am building the house of God."
Ah, that's the calling.
That's the calling. He connects the mundane, low-level task of laying bricks directly to his ultimate top-level concern, his highest value. Gritty people consistently find ways to link their daily grind to that bigger picture.
But the research is careful here, isn't it? It cautions against thinking of a calling as some kind of magical thing you just have to find, like it's waiting out there for you.
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
Sociologist Amy Wisniewski, who studies this, emphasizes that a calling is much more dynamic than that.
Dynamic how?
It's less about finding the perfect job title and more about how you interpret the work you already do. She suggests that pretty much regardless of your job, whether you're a CEO or a hospital custodian or an engineer, you can continually look at your work and ask, how does this connect to the bigger picture? How can this be an expression of my core values? How does it contribute to the well-being of others?
So it's an active process of interpretation, not just finding the right fit.
Exactly. It's about crafting meaning.
There's a great example in the sources. Joe Leader, the NYC subway engineer.
Yeah, his story really illustrates this interpretive shift beautifully. He initially took the job, working on subway signals purely for pragmatic reasons, pay back his student loans.
A totally understandable lower-level goal.
Right. But over decades of doing the work, maintaining those signals, seeing firsthand how his meticulous effort kept millions of people moving safely every day, witnessing the impact, his perspective changed.
He started to see it differently.
He began to feel like he wasn't just maintaining circuits, he was making a contribution to society. That demanding, often difficult technical job transformed, in his mind, into a calling. Not because the job itself changed, but because he successfully changed his internal interpretation of its meaning and connection to a larger purpose.
That ability to reframe, to interpret challenges and even mundane work in a positive, purposeful light that connects directly to mindset, doesn't it? Specifically, Carol Dweck's work on fixed versus growth mindsets.
Absolutely central. This is a cornerstone concept for understanding perseverance.
So just quickly refresh us. Fixed versus growth.
Sure. A fixed mindset is the belief that your basic qualities, things like intelligence or talent, are basically fixed traits. You're born with a certain amount, and that's that. You either have it or you don't.
Okay, it sounds limiting.
It can be. Whereas a growth mindset is the belief that your abilities aren't fixed. They can always be developed, changed substantially through dedication, effort, good strategies, and learning from mistakes.
You can get smarter, you can get better.
Exactly. And the connection to grit is incredibly strong and well documented.
How so?
Well, numerous studies show that having a growth mindset correlates significantly with higher levels of grit, more persistence in the face of difficulty, and a greater tendency to seek out and embrace challenges rather than avoid them.
Why is that? What's the mechanism?
Think about how you react to a setback. If you have a fixed mindset, failure feels devastating. It feels like proof that you just don't have the innate ability required. So why bother trying again?
You give up more easily.
Right. But if you have a growth mindset, a setback isn't a verdict on your permanent ability. It's simply information. It's a signal that maybe you need to adjust your strategy, try a different approach, or simply increase your effort. Failure is seen as an opportunity to learn and grow, not as proof of limitation.
Which naturally leads to more persistence, more grit.
Exactly.
This makes the language we use incredibly important then, both the way we talk to others, like when mentoring or parenting, and our own internal self-talk.
Hugely important. And you see this recognized in places like the KPP schools.
Right. The charter school network known for focusing on character strengths.
Yeah. They actively train their teachers to be very conscious about praising effort and strategy rather than innate talent or intelligence.
How do they do that specifically?
They apparently even have something like a teacher thesaurus designed to help swap out fixed mindset phrases for growth mindset ones.
Like what? Give me an example.
So instead of saying, wow, you're a natural at math, which implies fixed ability, a teacher might say something like, I really appreciate how hard you worked on that challenging problem, or that new strategy you tried for solving it was really effective. Let's talk about why.
Focusing on the process, the effort, the strategy, the things a student can control and replicate.
Precisely. It's a subtle but continuous shift in language. And the idea is that this reinforces the core belief that it's effort and strategy, not just innate talent, that lead to success, which in turn fuels the persistence, the resilience, the grit needed for tackling hard things over the long haul.
Okay, so we've got this picture. Sustained effort is key, and that effort needs to be fueled by purpose and a growth mindset. Now let's talk about how we actually cultivate grit. How do we build it in ourselves and maybe help foster it in others?
Right, because it's not just about individual psychology. The environment matters, support matters, culture matters.
And one of the absolute bedrock components of perseverance, according to the research, is hope.
Yes, hope, which isn't just wishful thinking. It's tied directly to what psychologists call our explanatory style.
Explanatory style, meaning how we explain bad events to ourselves.
Exactly. This brings us to the foundational work of psychologist Marty Seligman, particularly his early famous research on learned helplessness.
The experiments with the dogs.
That's the one. He found that dogs who were first exposed to electric shocks that they absolutely could not escape or control. Well, when they were later put in a different situation where escape was possible, they often didn't even try.
They just lay down and took the shocks.
Many of them did, yeah.
Yeah.
They had essentially learned that their efforts were futile. They'd learned helplessness.
That's a really sobering concept. How do we avoid that? How do we maintain hope and keep trying, especially when we face repeated adversity?
It comes back to how we explain that adversity to ourselves, our explanatory style. Seligman identified what he called the 3 Ps that characterize a pessimistic explanation.
The 3 Ps. Okay.
Pessimists tend to see bad events as 1, permanent, this is going to last forever, it will always be this way.
Okay.
2, pervasive, this failure is going to ruin everything, it affects every part of my life.
Right.
And 3, personal, it's all my fault, it's because of some intrinsic, unchangeable flaw in me.
Permanent, pervasive, personal. Got it.
Yeah.
So how do optimists, the gritty ones, explain things differently?
They basically flip it. Optimists, who tend to be grittier, explain setbacks in the opposite way. They see adversity as temporary, this is just a rough patch, it won't last. Specific, this affects only this one area, not my whole life. And often external, or at least learnable, this happened because of specific circumstances or a mistake I made, which means I can learn to avoid it next time.
So they contain the damage mentally. They don't let one failure define everything or seem like a permanent state.
Exactly. They maintain agency. They believe they can influence future outcomes.
There's that really neat study with the swimmers that demonstrates this so clearly.
Oh, yeah, the elite university swimmers, the great illustration. The coaches deliberately gave the swimmers false feedback after a swim. They told them their time was slightly slower than it actually was.
So inducing a small sense of failure or disappointment?
Right. Then they had them swim the distance again immediately.
And the difference between the optimists and pessimists was stark.
Immediate and measurable. The swimmers who had an optimistic explanatory style, the ones who tended to explain failures as temporary and specific, they either matched their previous, actual, faster time, or even swam faster on the second try. They bounced back.
Wow. And the pessimists?
The swimmers with a pessimistic style, the ones who likely internalized that slower time as proof of some permanent lack of speed or talent, they performed significantly worse on the second swim.
They spiraled down.
Right. And the sources note that when you ask grit paragons about their biggest failures or disappointments, they often kind of deflect. They don't dwell on them. They tend to explain the adversity optimistically, framing it as a chance to learn something, and then they just carry on with the next attempt, the next strategy.
That ability to reframe, to maintain hope, does that get easier over time? The sources mention something called the maturity principle.
Yeah, that's interesting. Research suggests that, on average, most people tend to become more conscientious, more self-confident, more agreeable, and calmer, basically, more mature, particularly between the ages of about 20 and 40.
So personality isn't totally set like plaster after childhood.
Apparently not. It suggests we can and do change, often when life circumstances demand it. When we need to step up, maybe starting a career, forming long-term relationships, we adapt. Necessity drives change.
Necessity is the mother of adaptation, maybe. But growth seems to be really accelerated when we face challenges, but face them in a specific way.
Yes. It's not just about facing adversity. It's about experiencing mastery alongside, or maybe through, adversity.
Okay, mastery through adversity.
There's related research by psychologist Steve Mayer, building on Seligman's work. He found, working with rats, that overcoming a significant stressor or adversity on their own, having control over the situation, even if it's difficult, actually wires the brain differently.
How so?
It seems to strengthen the brain circuits related to executive control, making the animal more resilient and proactive when facing future challenges. In contrast, passively enduring the same stressor without control doesn't have the same effect and can even lead to that learned helplessness.
So actively overcoming difficulty builds resilience in a way that just being protected from it doesn't.
Exactly. It's about activating your own control mechanisms.
This sounds a lot like the philosophy behind programs like Outward Bound, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. The whole goal of those kinds of experiential education programs, putting people in challenging outdoor situations, forcing them to navigate, solve problems, rely on themselves and their team, it's aimed at developing that sense of competence in what they sometimes call an undefeatable spirit.
You build confidence by doing hard things and succeeding, not just by being told you can do them.
You have to experience the mastery while grappling with the difficulty.
And this model, this idea of learning through overcoming challenges you control, it applies really well to mentorship too, right? The example of Toby Litka, the founder of Shopify.
Yeah, that's a fantastic example. When he was a young apprentice programmer in Germany, his mentor, Jürgen, had a very specific approach.
What did he do?
He would intentionally create situations or assign tasks that were just slightly outside Toby's current comfort zone. Challenging, but not impossible.
So he wasn't just giving him easy wins, but he wasn't throwing him completely in the deep end either.
Exactly. And crucially, Jürgen wouldn't just step in and solve the problem for him. He forced Toby to struggle, to figure it out through trial and error.
Activating that control circuitry, Toby needed to build himself.
Precisely. Toby succeeded and learned rapidly. Not because Jürgen held his hand every step of the way, but because Jürgen provided manageable adversity within a supportive context. It allowed Toby to experience that crucial feeling of mastery at the same time as he was overcoming the difficulty.
That combination seems key. High demand, but also high support. That's the sweet spot for fostering growth and grit.
That seems to be the common thread, yes. It's often called the wise approach in parenting and mentorship literature. Demanding, yes, but also incredibly supportive.
You see this really clearly with the parents of NFL quarterback Steve Young.
Oh yeah, great story there. His dad, Legrand, who actually preferred the nickname Grit, believe it or not.
Seriously, Grit Young.
Yep. He modeled incredible perseverance himself.
Yeah.
The source mentions him doing something like 10,000 sit-ups in a row just to prove a point about endurance.
Wow. Okay, so high standards were modeled?
Definitely. And when Steve was struggling at BYU, way down the depth chart, like 8th string quarterback, basically on the hamburger squad, and he called home wanting to quit.
What did his dad say? Come on home, son.
Not a chance. His dad's response was apparently simple and direct. You can quit, but you can't come home. You made a commitment. Endure to the end, Steve.
Whoa, that's high demand right there. No quitting.
Extremely high demand. But, and this is crucial, that demand was paired with incredible support.
How so?
Well, there's another story about when Steve was much younger, in second grade, and suffering from severe separation anxiety, he couldn't handle being left at school. His mother, Sherry, didn't just force him to tough it out alone. She actually went to school with him and sat in the back of his classroom for weeks until he gradually felt comfortable enough for her to leave.
Wow, that's incredible support. Demanding of commitment, but also deeply unconditionally supportive of his emotional needs.
Exactly, that balance. You see it again with the parents of Francesca Martinez, the comedian who has cerebral palsy.
Right. What was their approach?
They gave her what seems like unusual freedom, letting her drop out of school to pursue stand-up comedy, which was her passion.
That sounds very supportive, maybe less demanding.
Supportive, yes, but they also set very clear boundaries. They enforce strong moral limits and really emphasize the importance of work ethic, of seeing things through, of finishing things. It was described as no-nonsense parenting, prioritizing principles and follow-through even while supporting her unconventional path.
So, again, that blend. Support the person, support the passion, but demand effort and commitment.
Seems to be the pattern. And critically, this kind of transformative support doesn't only come from parents. Mentors outside the family can be incredibly influential.
Yeah, the story of Cody Coleman is really powerful.
It really is. He overcame some pretty severe disadvantages.
Mm.
Poverty, instability, eventually getting into MIT.
An amazing outcome. How did grit play a role?
Well, there was a key moment where his older brother directly challenged his mindset. Cody was kind of thinking, why even bother trying? The odds are stacked against me.
A fixed mindset, essentially.
Right. And his brother confronted him, basically saying, why not you? Why assume you can't succeed? That shifted something fundamental for Cody from why bother to why not?
A mindset shift. But was that enough on its own?
Probably not. The shift was crucial, but it was sustained, made practical by the long-term support of one of his high school teachers, Chantel Smith.
What did she do?
She provided incredibly practical, consistent support over years. Things like helping him pay for driving lessons so he could get to a better school, organizing a collection among teachers to buy him essentials for his dorm room when he got into MIT, welcoming him into her own home for holidays when he couldn't afford to travel back.
Wow, just real, tangible, long-haul support.
Exactly. It wasn't just inspiration, it was the logistical and emotional runway that allowed his newfound mindset and perseverance to actually take flight despite the obstacles. These kinds of relationships, they cultivate grit by making persistence feel possible, expected, and like part of belonging.
That idea of belonging, of shared identity, that leads us right into the final piece here. The power of culture. How the environment around us can actually amplify grit.
Yes, the concept of a social multiplier for grit.
Let's start with a national example. The sources talk about Finland and sisu.
Right. Sisu. It's this core Finnish cultural concept. Hard to translate perfectly, but it embodies extraordinary determination, resilience, persistence in the face of extreme adversity, like a kind of stoic tenacity.
Is it seen as something you're born with?
Interestingly, no. This source mentions a survey where 83% of Finns believe sisu is something that can be developed, that it's learnable.
How do they believe it's developed?
Often through culturally ingrained, challenging experiences. Things like demanding scouting programs, military service, enduring harsh winters. The culture itself reinforces and provides opportunities to practice and develop this kind of determination. It institutionalizes perseverance.
You see similar efforts to institutionalize perseverance within organizations too, right? Like Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan Chase.
Exactly. He talks about fortitude as a core value. He makes it clear that everyone will face setbacks, failure is inevitable in business. The key differentiator, he argues, isn't avoiding failure, but how you deal with it. The fortitude you display in picking yourself up and carrying on. He actively models and expects that resilience.
And then you have very specific techniques, like those used by the Seattle Seahawks under Coach Pete Carroll.
Yeah, they were really focused on cultivating grit and fortitude as part of the team culture. They reinforced it constantly, daily.
How? What did they actually do?
Well, one example is the beep test they did at the start of every season.
The beep test, the running back and forth thing.
That's the one. It's a maximal aerobic capacity test, basically designed to push players to their absolute physical limit. Run until you literally can't run anymore.
Sounds grueling. Why do it?
They used it explicitly as a measure of self-discipline and mental toughness. How far are you willing to push yourself when it gets incredibly painful? and they didn't keep the results private.
They posted the scores.
Yep. Publicly, it was an institutionalized way of measuring and signaling the value placed on the willingness to sustain painful effort.
And that kind of public standard, that cultural emphasis, it can create that social multiplier effect you mentioned.
Exactly, where one person's grit can actually elevate the grit of the entire group.
How does that work?
The sources use the example of Earl Thomas, the Seahawks' free safety at the time. He was described as just intensely competitive, incredibly gritty in his approach to practice and preparation.
A role model for effort.
Right. His intense focus, his work ethic, it provided this undeniable standard for everyone else on the team. Social scientists call this the social multiplier. When one person's high level of a trait, like grit, inspires or elevates that same trait in others around them.
Which then probably reinforces it in the original person too, right? Seeing others step up.
Precisely. It creates this upward spiral, this virtuous cycle. When the culture actively values, measures, and models grit, perseverance becomes the norm, the expectation, not the exception. It gets baked into the identity of the group. #tag out and outro.
Okay, so let's try and pull all these threads together. What have we learned from this deep dive into grit?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that success, real long-term achievement, it's just not about waiting for lightning to strike or being blessed with some magical innate talent.
Right. It's far more grounded than that.
It's the calculated, often grueling result of applying effort. And specifically, two kinds of effort, persistently, over a long time.
First, the effort needed to actually build your skill in something.
Talent times effort equals skill.
And second, the effort needed to then apply that skill day in and day out to actually produce results.
Skill times effort equals achievement. And that whole engine, that whole process, it's driven internally by cultivating a growth mindset, believing you can improve.
By connecting your daily grind to a larger sense of purpose, finding that why.
And externally, by being in environments, having relationships, being part of cultures that actively model, support, and even demand that kind of perseverance.
So if we redefine genius, not as success without effort, but maybe, as the sources suggest, as something like working toward excellence ceaselessly with every element of your being.
Then suddenly it becomes something much more accessible, doesn't it? It's not some mythical quality reserved for a chosen few. That capacity for relentless focused work resides, potentially, within anyone willing to commit to it.
Yeah, that definition is fundamentally more democratic, more empowering. It reminds me of that quote from the writer Ta-Nehisi Coates about writing.
Well, what did he say?
He described success not as some flash of brilliance, but as this relentless, often exhausting process of daily refinement. He said, you only get to good by first making the draft not so bad and then working it until it's average and just keeping at it day after day.
That's perfect. It captures that two-stage effort, the slow building of skill through painstaking work, and then the application of that skill through more painstaking work. The great things we admire are almost always built that way, tirelessly.
And we've seen today that a key way grit develops is by choosing to face challenges that push us, but that we can overcome, experiencing mastery through controlled adversity.
Right. Those moments where you push slightly outside your comfort zone and succeed, wiring your brain for control and resilience.
So maybe that leads to our final thought for you, the listener, based on everything we've explored.
What's one area of effort in your life right now, something you maybe consider too hard or too frustrating, something you're tempted to quit?
Could you choose, just maybe, to consciously stick with that thing for the next few weeks? Not necessarily expecting a breakthrough, but knowing that the very act of persevering, of choosing to engage with the difficulty, is itself the practice.
Knowing that simply staying on that treadmill, even when it's uncomfortable, is the only reliable path to actually growing grittier. Something to think about.
Indeed. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.